So I want you to imagine that you are 35 years old.
Okay.
You're standing outside a local daycare. It's a completely unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. The sun is shining, the air is crisp.
Yeah, just a normal day.
Exactly.
Mm.
You're doing the most mundane, grounding thing a human being can do.
Yeah.
You are waiting to pick up your kids, you're holding a tiny little backpack,
Right.
and then out of nowhere, you bump into an old buddy from grade school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you get to talk and catching up, and he just casually brings up a gifted education program that you two were in as children.
Just passing conversation.
Totally, just a passing comment. But the moment those words hit your ears, it's like a skeleton key turns in your brain.
Oh, man.
In the span of maybe a few seconds, decades of completely blanked out, violently horrific memories suddenly unlock and just flood your consciousness.
That is terrifying.
It really is. Your entire past, the very foundation of who you believe yourself to be, instantly rewrites itself into a nightmare, and you're just standing there on the sidewalk holding a kid's backpack.
It's a genuinely terrifying premise. But the thing is, for the man at the center of today's deep dive, this isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment.
No, it's not.
It is the exact inciting incident that completely shattered his reality.
And that is why we are so incredibly glad you're joining us today, because you and I are about to unpack something truly extraordinary and, frankly, deeply harrowing.
We really are.
Our source material today is a fascinating, highly detailed interview transcript from the YouTube channel News Nation.
Right.
It features a man named Tim Lira. And his story, it's one that will fundamentally challenge how you view the architecture of human memory.
Our mission today is to systematically unpack the extraordinary claims that Lira makes in this interview.
Yeah.
Because he is coming forward as a survivor of alleged childhood experimentation, specifically an illicit program that he claims operated in underground, military-style facilities.
Which sounds like something out of a movie, I know.
No, it does. But we are going to examine the highly specific, granular details he provides. We're talking about everything from supposed psionic or, psychic testing protocols to unimaginable, extreme physical trauma.
Right. But we aren't just going to list the things he says happen. We're going to really look under the hood here.
Exactly.
We're going to analyze the psychological mechanisms of severe dissociation, the narrative archetypes that surface in his account, and I think most importantly, the tangible physical medical evidence he presents.
Yes, the medical evidence is key.
Because that evidence is what makes this story impossible to just brush aside. Now, before we take a single step further into this darkness, we need to establish a very crucial caveat for you as you listen.
This is so important.
Our goal today is to impartially report on the contents of this News Nation interview.
Right, we really have to state that up front. We are not here to endorse or validate or prove the existence of psychic abilities or secret underground bases or illicit shadow government programs.
Exactly. We aren't taking sides on the reality of the sci-fi elements.
Our objective is to thoroughly and thoughtfully explore the claims themselves. We're here to analyze the very real human trauma described in the source material.
Because regardless of the origin point of that trauma, the psychological and physical scars this man carries are undeniably real.
Absolutely. And they demand serious, respectful analysis.
So let's go back to that moment outside the daycare.
Yeah, let's start there.
For 35 years, Tim had zero conscious memory of any of this. And then a casual conversation just shatters the dam.
It's incredible.
I think what terrifies me most about that is the sheer power of the human brain to just, to lie to us.
Yeah.
To completely wall off a massive chunk of our own lived experience.
It really speaks to the incredible, desperate mechanics of survival.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about severe dissociation, especially the kind that stems from sustained childhood trauma, we have to understand that we're talking about a physical and neurological barricade.
A literal wall in the brain.
Exactly. The brain literally walls off information. The memories aren't deleted, they are quarantined. The access roads to those specific neural pathways are deliberately severed by the psyche because the information they hold is just too toxic for the organism to process while still functioning in daily life.
So for 3.5 decades, Tim's brain just made the calculation that accessing those files would be catastrophic.
Precisely.
But then A totally mundane trigger, just the specific phrase about a school program from a childhood friend, completely bypasses all that security.
It's wild how that works.
It is wide, but to understand the memories that came flooding back, we really can't start at the daycare.
No, we have to go back.
Right, and we can't even start in the underground facility. We have to look at the environment that primed him for this.
Right, the family history.
Exactly. According to the transcript, Tim grew up in a place called Montesina, Washington. This is back in the 1980s.
Okay.
It's described as a very blue-collar timber town, kind of nestled out there between Olympia and the coast. And his family carried this incredibly intense dual legacy.
Yeah, there are two distinct tracks running through his family history here. On the one hand, you have very grounded terrestrial struggles.
Real-world problems.
Exactly. He notes in the interview that clinical depression ran deep on his mother's side of the family.
Right.
And then on his father's side, severe alcoholism was a significant generational problem.
Right.
So you immediately have an environment that, while he still describes his upbringing as pretty good overall, it definitely possesses a baseline of instability.
And I want to pause on that for a second, because if you have a family dealing with severe depression and active alcoholism, what does that actually do to a child developing in that house?
Well, from a developmental psychology standpoint, it creates a nervous system that is perpetually primed for hypervigilance.
Okay, so always on edge.
Right.
Yeah.
A child in that environment learns very early on to read the emotional weather of the room. They become highly attuned to subtle shifts in mood or tone of voice or tension.
Because they have to be.
Exactly, because their emotional and sometimes physical safety depends on anticipating the adult's unpredictable behavior.
Yeah.
Their baseline level of cortisol, the stress hormone, is just consistently elevated.
Wow.
They are, in a very real sense, conditioned to be acutely sensitive to their environment.
Okay, so that's the real world track, right? The stress track. But intertwined with that is this other totally bizarre track.
The anomalous lineage.
Yeah, a legacy of the anomalous. Tim claims his family had this ongoing lore about the supernatural. His grandfather supposedly had precognition.
The ability to see into the future.
Right. He didn't make a big show of it or anything, but it was just an accepted fact in the family. And then there's his uncle, his grandfather's son, who experienced precognitive dreams.
And the detail Tim provides about his uncle is incredibly dark.
It really is.
This wasn't just, a vague feeling of déjà vu. Tim says his uncle knew early in his adult life that his life was going to be cut short.
Yeah, he explicitly told his wife while he was in his 20s that his time was limited.
And tragically, he ended up developing Parkinson's syndrome in his 30s and passed away at the age of 40.
Wait, I have to challenge that a bit, though.
Go for it.
Because I hear a story like that, and my brain immediately goes to, well, isn't this just a self-fulfilling prophecy, or at least a post hoc rationalization?
What do you mean?
Think about it like a piece of scaffolding you put up against a building. If your family spends generations building a scaffolding that says, we have the gift of sight, we see the supernatural, aren't you just going to hang every weird, random, or tragic life event onto that exact scaffolding?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right. If you don't have the precognition scaffolding, an uncle saying, I feel like I'm going to die young, is just processed as severe anxiety or depression. But because the lore is already there, it's framed as a supernatural vision.
That is an excellent point, and honestly, the scaffolding analogy is the perfect way to look at this. The presence of that family lore doesn't necessarily mean they actually possessed supernatural abilities. What it means is that their baseline reality already included the impossible.
Right. The scaffolding dictates the shape of the narrative.
Exactly. When unexplained or deeply traumatic things happen to a child in that family, they don't just process it as random chaos. They have a pre-existing lexicon for it.
And that lexicon gets put to the test pretty early for Tim, right?
It does.
Because by his early teenage years, he is experiencing unexplained phenomena out in the woods around this timber town. He specifically mentions seeing glowing orbs and even a classic structured UFO.
Right. And because of his family's scaffolding, his mind is already accustomed to holding space for things that completely defy conventional explanation.
Yeah, he's primed for it.
If a child with no background in the anomalous sees a strange light in the woods, they might convince themselves it was a reflection or a trick of the eye, or they might just panic. But for Tim, it fits perfectly into the established family narrative. This is a crucial foundational element for what he claims happened to him, because it establishes that his psychological framework was already primed to accept, or at least process, deeply anomalous experiences.
Right. It sets the stage. But all of this, the depression, the alcoholism, the grandfather's visions, the lights in the woods, all of this is just ambient weirdness.
It's just the background noise.
Exactly. The actual mechanical nightmare that he remembered outside that daycare is hyper-specific. And he claims it began when he was incredibly young.
Just 4 years old.
Which brings us to the pediatric clinic.
So according to the timeline Lyra provides in the transcript, the events we are about to discuss take place between 1985 and 1989.
Okay.
He is between the ages of 4 and 9. His grandmother, who helps take care of him, brings him to a local pediatric clinic. The clinic is run by a physician he names as Dr. Cole.
The way he describes the geography of this experience is just so deeply unsettling to me.
It really is.
I want you to picture this. His grandmother takes him into the waiting room of this normal 1980s doctor's office. She sits down, presumably grabs a magazine, totally unaware of anything sinister.
Right.
Meanwhile, Tim, this tiny 4-year-old boy, is called back. But he isn't taken to a room with a paper-lined exam table and a jar of lollipops.
No.
He claims he was escorted to a hidden elevator located in the back office. And from there, a man in a typical mundane business suit would escort him down into the earth.
The contrast between the mundane surface and the subterranean environment he describes is just stark.
Yeah, what does it look like down there?
Well, once the elevator doors open at the bottom, he describes bleak, cold cement rooms. And it is vital to note what he doesn't describe here.
What's that?
He doesn't describe a gleaming, futuristic, sci-fi utopia. It is industrial, utilitarian, and oppressive. He talks about walking down long, echoing tunnels for 10 to 15 minutes at a time.
That's a massive facility.
It is. Occasionally, the distances were so vast that he would be put on a kind of internal train shuttle.
And the people he sees down there, he mentions seeing men in white lab coats, which, okay, makes sense in a medical or testing facility. But he also explicitly notes seeing personnel wearing standard 1980s woodland camo battle dress uniforms, BDUs.
Right. The presence of military uniforms immediately suggests a military or intelligence operation. But this raises a massive logistical and geographical question.
Yeah, the location.
Exactly. The interviewer points out during the discussion that the Lewis McChord Army Base is located about 15 miles away from the specific hospital plaza where this clinic was located.
Okay, so that could make sense.
Theoretically, a highly advanced 15-minute underground train shuttle ride could potentially connect the clinic to the base.
But Tim shuts that theory down completely.
He really does. He is absolutely adamant that the subterranean facility he was taken to was located miles west of the clinic.
And the base is where?
The Lewis McChord Base is in the completely opposite direction. He is insistent that the geometry and the direction of travel do not align with the known military base.
Which implies an entirely separate, unacknowledged installation just sitting under the Washington soil.
Exactly.
And it's so easy to just listen to this and think, okay, well, this is purely a dissociative fantasy. But then he drops this detail that bleeds the underground nightmare right up into the fluorescent lighting of the normal world.
The incident with the nurse.
Yes, it's so creepy.
The nurse incident is one of the most chilling moments in the entire transcript because of its grounded reality.
So Tim is about 8 years old. He's at a different specialist's office within the same medical plaza. He's there because he's suffering from severe gastrointestinal issues.
And please, keep that in the back of your mind because the GI issues become horrifyingly relevant later.
Yes, very true. So he's in the exam room. A nurse is checking his vitals. And Tim, with the innocent curiosity of an 8-year-old, just casually asks her if there are tunnels under this office, too.
Right. And if this were entirely a fantasy, the nurse might laugh it off or look confused.
Like, what are you talking about, kid?
Exactly. But according to Tim, her reaction is visceral. She looks entirely rattled. The blood drains from her face. She refuses to answer him, abruptly stops what she's doing, and sends him straight out to the waiting room.
And then, 10 minutes later, while Tim is sitting out there, he watches as 2 men wearing those exact same 1980s woodland camo BDUs emerge from a different section of the office suite.
The same uniforms from underground.
Yeah. They flank the nurse, and they physically escort her out the front door of the clinic. She spoke to the wrong child, or rather, the child asked the wrong question, and the invisible system behind the clinic immediately purged her.
And he didn't just ask the nurse, either. As he got a little older, entering his preteens, Tim claims he directly confronted Dr. Cole, his primary pediatrician.
Right.
He looked the doctor in the eye and asked him, point blank, if he had to go to the facility underground today.
And Dr. Cole didn't say, what facility? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
He didn't recommend psychiatric evaluation.
No, he didn't.
He scolded him. He just sternly said, don't talk about that.
What we are analyzing here, fundamentally, is a profound example of institutional betrayal.
Hold on, let's break that term down. For anyone listening who isn't familiar with trauma psychology, what exactly makes institutional betrayal different from, say, just a stranger hurting you?
It's a critical distinction. If a stranger attacks you in an alley, it is a horrific trauma. But your understanding of the world's rules remains somewhat intact.
Right, bad people are in alleys.
Exactly. Alleys can be dangerous. But institutional betrayal occurs when the very systems and authority figures that society explicitly designates to protect and heal you, a hospital, a school, a church, a pediatrician, are the ones perpetrating or actively facilitating the abuse.
So the sanctuary becomes the trap.
Precisely. The psychological impact is uniquely devastating because it shatters the child's foundational trust in reality itself.
Wow.
A pediatrician's office is supposed to be the ultimate safe zone. To have that specific environment act as a literal physical gateway to a subterranean nightmare creates a cognitive dissonance that the mind almost cannot bear.
It's infuriating because think about the setup of this clinic. It feels so calculated.
It does.
It reminds me of an anglerfish. You know those deep-sea fish that have the glowing lure dangling in front of their massive teeth?
Oh, yeah.
The friendly, sterile pediatrician's office with the magazines and the receptionist, that is the glowing lure. It is perfectly designed to make the prey, in this case, the child and the grandmother, feel completely safe. It draws them in.
Right.
But the massive hidden threat, the actual teeth of the operation, lies entirely concealed in the darkness just below the surface. The clinic is just the bait.
That is a terrifyingly accurate metaphor. The lure works perfectly. The grandmother sits in the waiting room, entirely placated by the institutional authority of the doctor, while feet away, her grandson vanishes into the abyss.
It's just so dark.
And once we understand where the anglerfish takes its prey, we have to logically progress to the darkest part of the transcript,
Right.
what they were allegedly doing to him down there.
And I have to warn you, the details we are about to discuss are grim. We are moving into the actual procedures.
Yeah.
According to Tim, the objective of this underground facility was twofold. First, the goal was to cause extreme dissociation, to literally torture the mind until it created walled-off boundaries within itself.
Right.
And second, to use that fractured state to test and intensify psychus, or psychic abilities. And they were doing this during a very specific, critical window of his life.
The timing is not coincidental. The interviewer and Tim discuss at length why a program would target a child between the ages of 4 and 9.
Right.
From a neurological standpoint, early childhood is a period of immense neuroplasticity.
I'm a little lost on the application here, actually. I know neuroplasticity means the brain is adaptable, but why is that a weapon? Why target a 4-year-old instead of a 20-year-old soldier who can follow orders?
Because a 20-year-old's brain has already established its fundamental understanding of reality. The synaptic pathways are relatively firm. But a 4-year-old's brain is incredibly malleable. It is rapidly forming millions of synaptic connections based purely on environmental input.
So they're basically a sponge.
Exactly. It is building the very concept of what is real and what is impossible. If a covert program wanted to, hypothetically, do base-level programming or attempt to fundamentally rewire a human brain to process anomalous perception, they cannot wait until adulthood.
It'd be too late.
Right. They have to exploit that specific developmental window before the brain rigidifies its reality filters.
So they get him in the window. What do the actual tests look like? The bizarre part is that some of it sounds almost quaint, like classic mid-century parapsychology.
Yeah, very old school.
He mentions Zener cards. For those who don't know, those are the cards they used in the 1930s ESP experiments. A deck of cards with 5 simple symbols: a star, wavy lines, a square, a circle, a cross.
Right.
He claims they would test his clairvoyance with these and that he was hitting them with 75% accuracy.
Which is incredibly high.
Yeah. And they would also have him sit in a room and try to adjust the temperature on clinical thermometers through sheer willpower. Or they would ask him to mentally manipulate waveforms bouncing across computer screens.
But those passive, almost clinical tests were allegedly just the baseline.
Just the warm-up.
Exactly. The horrific core of the protocol involved active, systematic trauma. Tim describes being strapped down to a chair so he couldn't move.
Oh, God.
Sometimes he says he was given a mysterious pink drink right before a session began. Once strapped in, he was forced to look at monitors displaying rapid, strobe-like flashes of images.
Like brainwashing material.
Right. And the images were a combination of graphic, snuff film-style gore and death, interspersed with intense religious symbols and occult glyphs.
And while his eyes are being bombarded with this horror, his ears are covered by headphones playing synthesized audio tones.
The interviewer specifically hones in on this detail. He points out that the audio tones Tim describes sound exactly like a technology known as hemisync, or hemispheric synchronization.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it utilizes binaural beats playing slightly different acoustic frequencies in each ear to theoretically force the brain waves to align to a specific frequency.
Wait, I need to stop you again because this is where the logic of this alleged program completely loses me.
Okay, what part?
The theory Tim presents is that they were trying to force the left and right hemispheres of his brain to synchronize. Fine. But biologically, why would showing a strapped-down child horrifying gore achieve brain synchronization?
Right.
Why would terrifying someone unlock psychic ability?
Well, to understand their alleged logic, you have to look at the mechanics of extreme trauma. Why use terror? Because absolute terror shatters the cohesive self.
Okay.
The theory discussed in the interview is that by overwhelming the young, highly plastic brain with inescapable horror, while simultaneously flooding the visual and auditory cortex with chaotic, rhythmic input, you intentionally overload the system.
You fry the circuit.
You deliberately fracture the psyche. You break the mind's ability to form a singular, integrated narrative of reality.
So the goal isn't just to scare him. The goal is to break the machine.
Precisely. And in doing so, the theory suggests you open a back door. The mind, trapped in a body experiencing inescapable physical and emotional agony, becomes desperate to escape.
Right.
It dissociates so violently from the physical reality that it might, theoretically, be forced to tap into other perceptive states or anomalous frequencies just to find an exit.
And if the visual bombardment wasn't enough, the physical punishment for noncompliance or even for just asking a question is where this story reaches its absolute darkest point.
Yeah, this part is really tough.
Tim describes being subjected to invasive, horrific rectal electroshock applied via a lubricated tube. He describes the pain as paralyzing. He says it felt like literal lightning was shooting through his entire body.
And crucially, the transcript notes that they didn't just use this as a punitive measure.
No.
No, they actively used this unimaginable pain to induce immediate out-of-body experiences, or OBEs.
Because the pain was so absolute, so entirely inescapable within the confines of his physical body, that his consciousness would literally eject.
Exactly.
He would suddenly find himself floating up near the ceiling, completely detached, looking down at his own tortured body strapped to the chair.
From an analytical standpoint, it is vital to pause here and look at the archetypes present in his testimony.
What do you mean?
Well, the mysterious pink shrink, the specific use of hemisync audio, the juxtaposition of clinical medical terminology with occult and religious imagery. These are incredibly common, persistent archetypes in conspiracy lore and severe survivor testimonies from the 1980s onwards.
Oh, like a pattern. The interviewer even brings that up.
Yes, he does.
He tells Tim that hearing about the pink drink and the visual flashes sends a shiver up his spine because they perfectly align with other survivor accounts he's investigated.
Yes, and that consistency leaves us with two analytical possibilities.
Okay, what are they?
Either there is a shared cultural language, a sort of collective unconscious toolkit that survivors use to articulate the inarticulable horror of severe abuse. Or, as the narrative insists, these consistencies exist because there was a standardized, heavily documented protocol being utilized across various illicit programs.
I mean, I am obviously sickened by the cruelty of this, but looking at it intellectually, it's infuriating because it relies on a glaring fundamental paradox.
The contradiction.
Yeah. If we assume the premise is true, this program is trying to build a superhuman. They want an intelligence asset with advanced psychic sensitivities, but their methodology is to absolutely systematically destroy the human being.
It is a profound contradiction.
It's like trying to overclock a computer processor by taking a literal blowtorch to the motherboard.
That's a great way to put it.
You aren't upgrading anything. You aren't installing new software or optimizing the system. You're just catastrophically melting the hardware down to slag and then standing around hoping that the resulting electrical fires and sparking glitches look like magic.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental, deeply arrogant misunderstanding of how strength or ability is cultivated. It relies entirely on the psychopath's premise that destruction yields transcendence.
The blowtorch analogy perfectly captures the sheer, brutal arrogance of the program's alleged design. It speaks to a mechanistic, completely dehumanizing view of the human mind.
Yeah, they didn't see him as human.
They viewed trauma merely as a tool, a lever to be violently pulled to force the brain past its natural biological limits.
Right.
But as you said, the result of that process isn't a highly functioning elite operative. The result is a shattered child.
And the most mind-bending logistical question of all of this is, how do you manage a shattered child in the daylight?
Right, because he doesn't stay down there.
Exactly. We've just spent all this time detailing these horrific procedures in a dark, isolated underground bunker. But Tim didn't live in the bunker. When the elevator went back up, he went back to his grandmother. He went to regular public school.
Yeah.
The people running this program had to have a way to monitor their slag in the real world.
Which brings us to the next phase of his life, and the deeply sinister way these individuals were allegedly tracked and managed within mundane societal structures.
Yes. Later in elementary school, Tim was placed in the school's GATE program, Gifted and Talented Education.
Okay.
Now, Tim himself is very candid in the interview. He notes that getting placed in this program shocked him because he didn't consider himself a particularly bright or academically gifted kid. He wasn't acing math tests.
And the physical setup of this gifted class was highly irregular.
How so?
They weren't in the main school building with the rest of the student body. They were isolated in mobile trailer out back a former kindergarten room.
Oh, weird.
And it was a very small cohort, only about 6 to 8 kids. Furthermore, despite being labeled gifted, Tim says they weren't doing advanced academics. They were doing mundane, time-killing tasks like putting together a little school newspaper. They were, for all intents and purposes, just parked out there.
This is where we are introduced to a boy named Adam, a friend of Tim's who was also in this specific trailer.
Right, Adam.
Adam supposedly won a space essay contest. But the reward for winning this contest was incredibly strange. Adam began being pulled from the trailer on a weekly basis. Administrators would just come and take him away for hours at a time.
One day, Adam asks the men who are taking him if his friend Tim can come along. And the men agree.
So Tim tags along. 2 men in normal civilian suits pick them up from the school. And they don't drive them to a science center or a museum.
No.
They drive them about 800 yards away from the school, just down the road to a different building. The men turn to Tim in the car and ask him, "Do you know why we're here?"
Right.
Tim, thinking of Adam's essay, says, "We're here for space." The men just laugh at him.
And that laughter is the last thing Tim remembers.
Missing time.
Yes.
Yes.
He experiences total memory loss. He blacks out entirely, losing hours of time, only waking up later with the men driving him back to the school, casually telling him, "We're taking you back because you didn't want to participate."
The sinister reframing of the GATE program here is what I find so chilling. In standard, normal educational models, gifted means academically advanced. You read at a higher grade level.
Right.
But if we view this through the lens of Tim's narrative, the label of gifted is entirely co-opted.
Yes, the meaning is inverted.
Yeah.
In this context, gifted is not a marker for intelligence. It is a marker for neurodivergence, for a specific psychological profile, or for the anomalous sensitivities they were trying to cultivate.
The kids who are different.
Exactly. The trailer isn't designed to nurture intellect. It is designed to isolate and aggregate a very specific demographic of children whose psychological traits make them ripe for exploitation.
It's like an agricultural sorting mechanism.
Right.
In a normal world, getting into GATE is like winning a shiny gold star sticker. It's an award. But in Tim's reality, that gold star is actually just a barcode slapped on a product.
That's a grim way to look at it,
Yeah.
but accurate.
It looks like an award to the proud parents and the oblivious teachers, but it actually allows unseen forces to track their inventory, isolate the specific crop they want, and harvest it right under the noses of society.
And the tragedy of Adam is the ultimate proof of that harvest. Years later, as they got a bit older, Adam hinted to Tim that he was being actively abused during those weekly pullouts.
He knew something was wrong.
Tim, trying to help, told him, "Your dad is a police officer, tell him." But Adam refused.
Why? Why wouldn't you tell a cop? Especially your own dad.
Because the psychology of entrapment is powerful. Adam came from a large family surviving on a single income. He likely felt entirely trapped.
Right.
He may have been threatened that if he spoke, his family would be destroyed, or he may have simply believed that the power of the institution abusing him superseded the power of a local police officer.
And the devastating conclusion to Adam's story is that today, as a grown adult, Adam claims to have absolutely zero memory of any of this. Total permanent amnesia.
It provides a stark, tragic contrast between two different trauma responses. Tim's dissociative barriers were strong, but they eventually fractured in his mid-30s, validating him with the horrific reality of his past.
Right.
Adam's dissociative barriers, however, appear to have calcified permanently. His childhood silence transformed into a complete and total erasure of the self that experienced the trauma. It underscores the profound, life-altering psychological cost of this kind of sustained terror.
And just to solidify the sheer scale of what Tim believed was happening, there's one more encounter he remembers from his time underground.
Oh yes, this part.
He's on one of his descents, walking through a large, cavernous room filled with computers and personnel dressed in business casual clothes again, mixing the mundane with the subterranean.
Right.
A worker looks down at Tim and asks him the classic question you ask any kid in the 1980s. What do you want to be when you grow up? Tim gives the standard answer. I want to work for NASA.
And the worker's response completely shifts the paradigm of the entire narrative. He smirks at the child and says, "This is the real space program."
That phrase, it takes the story from an isolated, localized nightmare about a creepy doctor doing psychic research and immediately launches it into the realm of massive, overarching shadow government lore.
The implication of that single sentence is staggering.
It really is.
It implies that publicly facing monumental institutions like NASA or the public school system's GATE program are merely veneers. They are public relations cover stories designed to distract the populace from the actual covert machinations of power happening beneath their feet.
But you cannot barcode a child, subject them to years of torture, and then just expect them to walk away clean.
No, the trauma doesn't just disappear.
You cannot carry a buried radioactive core of trauma without it eventually leaking out and contaminating your life. Which brings us to the fallout, the long-term consequences, the occult echoes, and the agonizing search for truth.
Let's examine Tim's teenage years. During this period, he has no active conscious memory of the underground facility or the electroshock.
Okay.
However, his behavior is deeply, profoundly affected by the repressed trauma. He finds himself intensely drawn to the occult. He is reading the Necronomicon, devouring H.P. Lovecraft, studying Aleister Crowley.
Right, getting into the dark stuff.
He possesses an intuitive, undeniable sense that there is more to reality than the mundane world around him.
In psychology, there's a term for this, right? The return of the repressed.
Exactly. It's a foundational psychoanalytic concept. The explicit autobiographical memories of the trauma are securely walled off behind dissociative amnesia.
But they still find a way out.
Right. The emotional resonance, the somatic terror, and the thematic elements of the abuse constantly leak out into the conscious mind. His teenage brain is desperately trying to process his underlying experiences, but without the specific memories, it has to find a proxy.
Oh, I see.
It naturally gravitates toward the only cultural framework that matches the intensity, the darkness, and the horror of what he actually endured, the occult.
But it wasn't just him sitting in his room reading spooky books. The weirdness was actively hunting him in the real world.
Yeah.
He describes experiencing bizarre, targeted harassment. He talks about walking home and having rocks thrown at him from the woods by completely unseen forces. And then there were the phone calls.
The detail about the phone calls is particularly insidious.
He would get home from school, and right before he walked in the door, a message would be left on his answering machine. It was always a male voice, and the voice would be reading rhythmic poetry or prose.
Tim specifically notes that the words themselves weren't explicitly violent or threatening, but the cadence, the specific rhythm of the voice, was a trigger.
Right.
Hearing it induced an immediate trance-like withdrawal in him. It caused a psychological regression.
And the real-world anchor that makes this so terrifying is that his mother actually had the phone company trace these bizarre calls.
Oh, yeah.
One call was traced to a local payphone in town, but the other call was traced to a payphone on Lily Road. And Lily Road was located right near the medical facility where the pediatric clinic was.
So the nightmare was literally stalking him in the daylight, using triggers to remind his nervous system that they were still there, even if his conscious mind didn't know who they were.
And as he moves out of his teens and into his 20s, whatever coping mechanisms he had left completely fail.
Right, things get worse.
He spends his entire 20s as a severe self-destructive alcoholic. He describes his internal state during this decade as an emotional void. He was completely detached. He explicitly states he was unable to feel joy, love, or basic human emotion. He was just a hollow shell surviving day to day.
That profound emotional deadness known as anhedonia is a hallmark symptom of complex PTSD and severe chronic dissociation.
It makes sense.
The brain's mechanism that shuts down unbearable terror is not a scalpel. It is a sledgehammer. You cannot selectively numb emotion. If you numb the paralyzing, unspeakable pain of childhood torture, you inadvertently numb everything else along with it.
The good and the bad.
Exactly. The joy, the love, the connection, it all gets flatlined.
Then, as he hits his 30s, the cracks in the dissociative walls start getting wider. He begins experiencing intense episodes of sleep paralysis.
Right.
But instead of seeing a vague shadow in the corner of the room like most people do, he sees a highly specific entity standing over his bed. He describes a gray-skinned, black-eyed, demon-like figure.
Oh, that's horrifying.
And Tim immediately felt a deep, intuitive connection between this entity and his teenage days exploring the occult. It felt to him like an old acquaintance had returned.
Now, if we pause here, a skeptic could easily argue that everything Tim has described up to this point can be cleanly categorized under the umbrella of severe psychological distress. The memories unlocked at a daycare, the teenage occult fascinations, the alcoholism, the sleep paralysis visions, all of this could theoretically be attributed to false memory syndrome, a highly vivid imagination, or the tragic unraveling of a mind plagued by the generational mental health struggles we discussed at the very beginning.
Right. You could write the whole thing off as a tragic psychological collapse.
You could, except for what happens next. The entire narrative hinges on the revelation that occurs when Tim is 37 years old.
The physical medical evidence.
Yes. This is the crux of the entire deep dive, the anchor that prevents this story from floating away into the realm of pure fantasy.
At age 37, Tim goes into the hospital for what is supposed to be a completely standard routine surgery for internal hemorrhoids. But the surgery doesn't go as planned.
No, it doesn't.
It takes significantly longer, and it is highly complicated. When he goes back in for his 2-week post-op checkup, the surgeon sits him down and confronts him. The doctor looks at Tim and asks him what prior medical procedures or surgeries he has had done in that area. Tim is confused. He says, "Nothing. This is my first surgery."
And the surgeon then delivers a medical bombshell.
The doctor tells him that the surgery was immensely complicated because 85 to 90% of Tim's rectum was comprised entirely of cauterized scar tissue.
That is just staggering.
The physical damage was so extensive, so catastrophic and deeply embedded that the doctors literally had to surgically rebuild his rectum using tissue harvested from his colon.
We must dwell on the absolute weight of this physical reality. You cannot confabulate cauterized scar tissue.
You can't imagine it into existence.
A vivid imagination does not physically destroy and burn internal organs. The profound psychological reality of his trauma is unequivocally validated by a horrific, undeniable physical reality. Something brutal, highly systematic, and intensely physical happened to his body when he was a child. The medical evidence is absolute.
It's the moment the whole esoteric sci-fi story slams face first into a brick wall of reality. I want to frame this because the tension here is insane. Listening to Tim's story is like coming home from work and finding a very real, completely shattered window in your living room. There's glass everywhere. The wind is blowing in. It is a physical mess.
Right.
And the only explanation your brain can offer you is that a ghost threw a rock through it. Now, people can sit around and debate the existence of ghosts or psychic programs all day long, but the rock on your floor and the broken glass, the cauterized scar tissue, are 100% real and undeniable.
Yes.
The question that remains agonizingly out of reach is, who actually threw the rock?
That captures the enigma perfectly. The damage is a certified medical fact. The mechanism of the damage, however, remains shrouded in the fractured memories of a traumatized child and the suffocating silence of the institutions involved.
And what does Tim do with this undeniable proof? He goes to the authorities. He reaches out to the FBI, specifically the Seattle field office, and they completely dodge him.
Okay.
They refuse to seriously engage. He overhears them telling a coworker there's nothing they can do before they even formally speak to him. He is left entirely on his own with this horrifying revelation.
And it is crucial to note his motivation for doing this interview with News Nation. He is speaking out now for absolutely no financial gain.
Right.
He isn't selling a course. He is
Uh-huh.
monetizing a cult. He even explicitly admits during the interview how deeply embarrassing it is to share these specific, intimate
It's
details.
not a fun story to tell.
No, he's a regular blue-collar guy in his mid-40s, and he is acutely aware of how insane his story sounds to the general public. His reluctance, his embarrassment, and his lack of a profit motive lend a certain tragic, grounded credibility to his testimony. He is simply a man who went to get minor surgery and had his entire reality shattered by the physical evidence of his own buried torture.
Which brings us to the synthesis of this incredible heavy burden. We've spent the last hour or so walking down two parallel tracks.
Yes, we have.
On one track, we have these terrifying, almost cinematic claims of systemic underground psychic experimentation, military personnel operating in civilian clinics, and shadow space programs pulling kids out of trailers.
The anomalous track.
Right. And on the other track, we have the undeniable, deeply tragic reality of severe physical childhood abuse that led to a lifetime of dissociation, alcoholism, anhedonia, and catastrophic medical scarring.
And regardless of which track you prioritize as the truth, the destination of this deep dive is the same. It is a profound exploration of human survival.
Exactly.
The story forces us to look unblinkingly at the extreme lengths the human mind will go to when it is trapped in an inescapable nightmare.
So why should you care? Why sit and listen to something so intensely dark? Because this story connects directly to the everyday marvel and terror of your own brain. You possess memory. You rely on your mind to protect you, to filter reality every single day. Tim's story is an extreme, dark mirror. It reflects just how powerfully the brain will partition reality, build massive amnesiac walls, and rewrite your own history just to ensure the physical organism survives to see tomorrow.
It does.
We all have our own small dissociations, our own forgotten stressful moments. Tim's case just shows us what happens when the volume on that survival mechanism is turned up to a deafening, life-altering roar.
It challenges our comfortable assumptions about the integrity of our own internal narratives. It asks us to consider what might be hidden in the blind spots of our own consciousness. And above all, it demands a profound empathy for those whose blind spots conceal unspeakable pain.
I want to leave you with a final lingering thought, something for you to mull over as you step away from this and go about the rest of your day. We've talked extensively about how trauma shatters the mind and how dissociation builds thick walls to hide the broken pieces. But if extreme, sustained trauma can completely shatter the mind's perception of itself to the point of blanking out years of life, could it be possible that the brain, in its ultimate desperate bid to escape the pain of the physical world, doesn't just block out reality, but somehow, briefly, taps into an entirely different one?
That is a question that neuroscience, psychology, and perhaps even the anomalous will be wrestling with for a very long time.
Thank you so much for taking this intense deep dive with us today into the shadows of memory, trauma, and the unknown. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.